All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Robert Nolan. I am the editor-in-chief of WorldView magazine, and I am super, super happy to be here with you guys today. Quick shout to Nikki for keeping everything hyped.
He definitely keeps it hyped.
She keeps it hyped. She's going to keep it going all day. And I cannot think of a better person to start this event off with us today than Jason Carter, a.k.a. the Prince of America, I guess maybe we could call him.
Thankfully, we don't have to.
I was going to start our conversation by saying that it's been, I think, 25 years or more since you and I first met as young volunteers in Southern Africa. I was in Zimbabwe. Jason was in South Africa. CD, I think, is here as well. And but at 7 a.m. this morning, bleary-eyed, I stepped into the elevator, and there was Jason. So I guess it's only been about 45 minutes.
Right now, yeah, right
now. So this is called a fireside chat. I don't think we have time for a fireside chat, so this is going to be maybe more of a lightning round. But as the editor-in-chief of WorldView, and knowing how much this group cares about storytelling, I thought maybe we could start there. You know, all of us as volunteers had that quintessential moment where we knew that, this was going to be a profound experience, that this was going to be something transformative in our lives. And you came back, you wrote a book about your experience, but I thought maybe we could talk about that. If you haven't read Power Lines, excellent book about post-apartheid South Africa that Jason's written.
If you can't find a copy, I have a ton at my house.
Maybe he'll sign it for you too if you're lucky.
They're more valuable if they're not signed, frankly, because I've signed so many.
So I guess I just wanted to ask you first about, what was that quintessential moment for you? And then, when we did our interview for WorldView a few months ago, you talked about some writing tips for young people to tell their stories when they come back. So maybe first your experience, and then a little bit about some hot tips for young writers.
I'll do them both at the same time, just lightning round. I kept a journal, right? I mean, and that's the most, I think, important thing that I would say. And in fact, that's the only advice my grandfather gave me when I left. And I said, "What's your advice?" He said, "Keep a journal." And I would just add to that now. Yes, you're going to post stuff. Yes, you're going to have this online presence now. But keep a journal for yourself too, because some of this stuff you don't want out there in the world just because you're not sure what it means, right? And so for me, at least, like being alone in the Peace Corps in that way is just different than any other thing. And so for me, I'll tell you the experience that I think of about this and that is reflected in my journal, and that's not in my book, is we used to, back then at least, the easiest way for me to get anywhere was to hitchhike. And so everybody hitchhiked all the time, and most people wouldn't stop and pick me up because if they were white, they were like, "What are you doing out there hitchhiking?" And if they were black, they were like, "You're white." But I eventually, people knew me enough that people would be like, "I've heard of this guy." And so I was getting rides, and then, but it's hard to get all the way into Johannesburg back then. And so I just remember that I was on my way to Johannesburg to meet up with some folks. And I ended up in this place I didn't really know. And I was literally on the side of the road, and the sun started to go down. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to be fine. Like, I can find a place to stay. I can deal with what I need to deal with. And it was just such a freeing experience, because I was like, in fact, not only am I going to be fine, but if I wanted to, I could, starting today, I could be in Nairobi in 5 days. I could do whatever I wanted to do. And you just stop being afraid of the world in the ways that you might, right? And so that was it for me. And that's a different thing. Not everybody gets that. I was, but that was, there was a moment like that for me. But.
Great. So I wanted to turn, and don't get nervous, a little bit to politics. You sort of nodded to a couple of the dynamics that are taking place in this country, and NPCA recently partnered with an organization called New Politics, and they're involved in supporting recruiting and training up-and-coming people who want to do public service. And in particular, they're looking at folks who have done national service, right? Whether that's AmeriCorps, whether that's Peace Corps, whether you served in the armed forces. And I wonder, as someone who's participated in politics and run for election, you won some, you lost some, just like your grandfather. And I wondered just kind of what your experience was like there, and what recommendations you might have for a young person maybe coming back from Peace Corps who wants to step up, who wants to go run for office, whether at the local, state, or even national level, and sort of where do you see the sort of the new politics going? Like, what is the future of politics in this country?
It's hard to lightning round that one.
Yes, it is. Bad.
I think number one, there's a lot to do, right? I mean, I think our chairman who ran for school board, right? It is a huge amount of work to be done at local levels. And don't be afraid of that. It's also the easiest place to start. Easiest in terms of you don't have to know a bunch of people who can donate lots and lots of money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's very hard to do the work, right? It's much harder in some ways to do the work to get elected to the school board than it is to run for governor if you know the people who are going to fund a campaign, right? But that barrier to entry of money is much lower at the local level. That barrier to entry of money is much higher at the national level or anywhere else. But what it allows you to do if you start small is it allows you to start meeting folks, to start making those connections, and it allows you to build not just a resume, but an actual understanding of how the world works. I mean, my Peace Corps experience was alienating in some ways. It was a crazy cultural experience in some ways, but like the Georgia State Senate is like pretty crazy too, And so there, but when I got there, you realize, just like you do in the Peace Corps, that all these people are pretty much the same, And we all have a lot more in common than we think, right? And they may come from a different place and say different things to the TV cameras, but when we sit there and talk, they pretty much want to have a better education for their kids. They pretty much want to make sure that they've got good jobs for the other people in their community, not just their own family. They want to do what's good. They're not there, for all the wrong reasons. And those experiences are valid. And so I just think that the two things I would say is you don't be afraid to start small. A state Senate race is a hard race to win, but it's really valuable. And there's real work that can be done in those small races. And it helps you build a resume and a reputation that you can take on sort of from there. But the other thing is just do it. Don't be afraid of it. The worst thing that's going to happen, it's like the Peace Corps. The worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to learn a lot about yourself. And you're going to learn a lot about your community, and you're going to learn a lot about what it means to try to connect across differences with people. And that's just exactly the kind of thing that we have to have in our politics. And then once you get in, right, the people that are in politics, that are doing this work now, that understand, number one, how important it is for us to connect to the world in real ways, not just with economics and military, but to connect. We need them in politics. We need those people, and we need people that are willing to reach across and bring people together. And so I would just say do it.
Yeah, that's great advice. We do have a couple questions that were submitted beforehand, and I'm going to read one from Jack Appelstein. Jack, he says, as an RPCV, former Carter Center guinea worm TA, and Emory alumni, so strong Atlanta roots coming here. I have taken immense pride in following your family's footsteps. In the current world order, where do you see goodness actually winning right now? And how do we make kindness cool again? It's a great question.
So it's a great question, but I reject the premise. I think that people are getting just sick of the meanness already. I actually think that where we are today in our politics is the result of actual alienation, where good people felt alienated from our politics and felt like they weren't getting anything for electing people. And that's not one party's fault. The people who are in power now are not a cause so much as they are a symptom of this idea that people felt like there was nothing good that was ever going to come out of the government. And that I think is real. Yes, there's division. Yes, there's people who have, who will always sort of demonize differences. But I think that for the most part, people reject that. And if you look at the national polling data on what people think about the current sort of folks that are in power, they don't like them. And I think they don't like them in part because of the attitude that it's become. I think that the reflecting pool is actually a good reflection of what it looks like right now, right? I mean, it's sort of gross and algae covered, and that's not just a metaphor. And I think that we have to recognize that people, I think, are there, and just be confident that there is goodness out there, and that people do sort of underneath the veneer of our politics. It's not the veneer is what's bad. I think what's underneath that is actually good. And I think when we talk about kindness being cool, we've never thought it wasn't. And I think that this group of people in here, we know that.
I think we need like an NPCA button that says kindness is cool.
Yeah,
let's get that up at the merch station next year. So you actually segued right into my next question. You mentioned some of the Gallup polling, the Edelman Trust Barometer that they do every year has just shown, more and more mistrust of governments, of institutions, of media, probably even of nonprofits. But, the Carter Center has probably one of the best global brands in the sort of civil society space. And I just wonder, with so much polarization going on around the world, I think you mentioned Hungary, you guys obviously do election monitoring all over the world. I wonder how you intend to retain that brand integrity moving forward, under your leadership at the Carter Center.
So, a couple things. Number one, we have to stay true to the mission, right? We have to be a human rights organization. We have to be an organization that respects people, that meets people where they are, that goes beyond the end of the road and does that partnership that I discussed, right? And we have to stand up for the things that are right and be seen to do that. And one of the ways we had to do that in 2016, 2020, when we were out in the rest of the world trying to promote democracy, we realized and believed that for both our own reputation and otherwise, we needed to focus on American democracy, because nothing is more important for international democracy than the health of American democracy. And as optimistic as I have said I am, it still requires work. Again, democracy is not permanent. It's not made of stone. It's remade all the time in the image of the people who participate. And so we have to take that responsibility over and over again. And what the Carter Center has done in the United States is build a constituency to support the trust in the system, right? I mean, and one of the problems that we've seen in countries around the world where we've observed elections in fragile democracies is once you lose faith in the system, it's very hard to build it back. And so you look out at our institutions and people distrust them, but we do have people who trust their own local elections, for example. And we have to, we've seen our electoral system, for example, be under really significant attack from the most powerful person in the country in the last 2 days, attacking the integrity of the election system. But that system has held repeatedly. Right? So people have challenged elections. They've gone to court. The court has said, this looks like a fine election. They've litigated, they've relitigated, they've kept making claims, but guess what? The system is still sitting right there. The rule of law has held, right? So we have strong institutions. We just have to make sure that we're not denigrating them for no reason. And that goes for both sides, right? I will say this. I think this is really, really important. The United States has 9,000 separate electoral jurisdictions. It is virtually impossible to steal an election in 9,000 separate jurisdictions, okay? And we've got people on both sides of the aisle talking about how so-and-so is gonna rig the election, or so-and-so did rig the election, or blah, 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 blah. We have to be careful with that. Somebody has to be a constituency that says this system is too valuable to politicize it. And so one of the things we've done in many states is the Carter Center has taken its democracy experience and its conflict resolution experience and has applied it in North Carolina, in Georgia, in Michigan, in Wisconsin, in Arizona, in a variety of other places where we are bringing constituencies together. It does not have our name on it. You talked about our brand. It doesn't say Carter Center on it, in part because the Carter Center is seen as associated, thank God, with Jimmy Carter. But that's sort of a partisan identity in some ways, right? Even though we're a nonpartisan organization. So what we've done is we've taken the Carter name off, unless we've been there with Ford, unless we've been there with some of the other like high profile people from across the aisle to maintain credibility. But we've built cross-partisan constituencies in all of those states. In Michigan would have Republicans, Democrats, independents who understand the way the elections work, who understand how resilient they are, and who are willing to stand up to people who tear down the system and say, that's not right, let's look at the facts. And I think that is something that we have done to continue to do what we believe is right. And again, that's not partisan. Democracy is not partisan, as we said on the way in the door. But we have to make sure it's not seen as partisan either. And so that's what we've been trying to do, is build that resilience, build that constituency to support the health of our democracy, and know that we've got to do that. And we can do that globally, by the way, too, right? I mean, we're going to need, as we've seen, you can't necessarily rely on government to support democracy. And so we have to build civil society in lots and lots of different places, link up in some global civil society ways, where we've got people that are out there fighting for human rights, that can do it cross-border in different places, that can support each other from afar, because it matters. Again, you know, as we say, it matters if somebody gets sick in Central China. It also matters if somebody loses their rights in South Sudan, for example, or in the country of Sudan. And so we're continuing that fight, and we're going to try to stay loyal to it, and we're also going to try to take a long-term view of what democracy means, right? A lot of people just want to make sure we win the next election, and that's valuable. And I have candidates that I want to win, but it's more important to me that our democracy stays healthy in the 20-year term and the 50-year term and the 250-year term than it is that we make excuses for elections. And the last thing I'll say is this: everybody thinks the elections are perfect when they win. And everybody, it's much easier when you lose to tell yourself and your supporters that you lost because somebody else rigged it than because you were wrong or because people didn't vote for you. Like, I got a bunch of votes when I ran for governor, but I didn't get enough to win. And if I wish there were 100,000 more of you that lived in Georgia at the time. But the point is, there's a lot of reasons that we have to make sure that we continue to support that system.
Yeah. I think we have time for just one more question. This will be my last one. And, I think all of those things you just said are particularly relevant, right, at the America 250-year celebration. And I think, I live overseas. We've all lived overseas, right? And we get criticized a lot of times for U.S. policies, but people always say, but we love Americans, right? And I think a lot of these characteristics, service, they were observed, early on by people like, Alexis de Tocqueville. And, continuing, I think, this coming togetherness, this building of civil society, forming groups to, put forth and advance causes that are important to our community is something that's always been admired. And your grandfather in particular, whether it was high level, Camp David, bringing, Middle Eastern parties together in Egypt and Israel, or just working for Habitat for Humanity. So one of the things NPCA is looking to do over the course of the next year is work on the ground, and you mentioned a little bit with the Carter Center. What are the nuts and bolts? People want to know what we can do as individuals. So we really do have to wrap up, and I know that's another big question, but if you have any thoughts on that before we wrap up.
So I think it's really easy to make a bad impression all at once, right? It's really easy to have the United States participate in some horrible thing and have everybody be like, the government of the United States is bad. Or it's really easy in politics to spend $100 million on advertising that makes people think that the other guy is terrible. I think it's really hard to build durable, good feelings. And so that almost has to happen person to person. No one's going to trust the candidate for office because they're running for office, right? I mean, it's almost per se. As soon as you just say I'm running for office, everyone's like, well, whatever you're going to tell me, I'm going to discount. And so you have to have, and that's true, I think, internationally. I think that there's so many ways to make a bad impression. There's so many ways to divide and to bring people together, to build good feeling to do those things, it takes individual human connection. And so we just have to continue to build those connections, but you have to do it everywhere, right? Like there's people who will trust you in your whatever Pilates class or in your church group or in the things and the places where you exist in the world that are real, that have real human connection. And you take those places and use those. And some of these are online communities. Some of them are just, but they are communities of care. They're communities where people trust each other. And we have to make sure that we're activating those communities in ways that are going to go out and say, we need the United States to be a positive force in the humanitarian world. We need the United States to do this. We need to bring people together. We need to stop demonizing the other side of our politics. We need to start, realizing that there's more to this than, just this current government that's in power. And I think the more we do that, honestly, that's how you begin the movement, right? I mean, what they talk about, and we've done a lot of research at the Carter Center and others have, and we've relied on other research about how to stop autocracy. And when you start sort of sliding towards autocracy, there's this famous data that shows that if 3.5% of the population takes to the streets, then you can bring down a government. But that 3.5% of people in the streets is not the beginning. That is the result of a giant number of acts of courage that have steeled people against whatever it is that's going on, that have happened. And there's so many people behind that, right, that comes out. And the more that we just are seen with the people that we care about and expanding that group and remembering that, when people see you doing things that are courageous, that represent what you believe, you give them the right to start doing that too. And I think that's where we are. But I think it's a human person-to-person contact, but it's using that person-to-person contact to build the kind of courage and resilience that we need in order to go and fight the public fights. But that's at least what I'm trying to do.
Well, Jason, thanks so much for doing this.
No, thank you guys for having me.
You and your family are just, so cherished by this Peace Corps community. So we really appreciate you being here. And let's keep this conference moving. I'm not sure who's coming up. Probably Nikki, I imagine. Yeah, come on through.
Siabonga, Nikki.